please.
Welcome back to the next part of this Truth and Rhythm episode. Be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you've already done so, please share it with friends. Also become a member by joining Truth and Rhythm on Patreon, or consider donating at funkinstuff.net. Thank you so much for your interest and support. Enjoy.
New Year comes along, Controversy is recorded and he's going to be coming out. Roy's got to go back to Minnesota to start doing rehearsals for the tour, for a Controversy tour. And he says to me, you have to come with me. You have to come out on the road with me. I can't leave you. I don't want to be alone without you. You've got to be there. And I said, Roy, you know what it's like on the road. Where am I going to stay? Where am I going to sleep? How are we going to do this? And he says, you'll be with me on the lighting bus, on the crew bus. And I said, what? I can't be on a crew bus unless I've earned my spot. You know that. And he says, we'll figure out something. And so I wound up with 4 or 5 jobs, you know, little jobs here and there. And 2 of them was taking care of Prince's wardrobe. And the other one was filming his show every night with a video camera. And for his, so he could critique his shows after the show. And it was when I was on, we took a break around Christmas time, got back together for the second portion of the show, going into 1982. Setting, we were out in the Midwest somewhere. I can't remember which place. I'd have to look at the tour list. And I was setting his stuff up in his dressing room. And he came in, sat down at the table, started working on his hair and stuff like this, and popped a cassette tape into his little boombox on the table. And it was Stevie Nicks' Stand Back. It wasn't a finished version of it. And something he was listening to. And I recognized her voice right away. And I was busy doing my thing. And, you know, when you've been around and involved in music, you know, pretty much all your life, and singing, it doesn't take you long to pick up, you know, something that you're hearing, something that you're listening to. So I started singing along with it and started singing a couple of harmony things in a few spots. And I'm not even paying attention. I'm just being me doing this. You know, it's a natural thing for me to do. And I turned around at one point with his boots in my hand. And I stopped and I looked because he's got the hair wand up here like this in the mirror looking at me, listening to me. And so I caught his eye and I stopped and he looked and he said, he turned around and looked at me and he said, I didn't know you sang. I said, yeah, I like to sing. And he put the wand down and he said, well, you could be the other hooker. And I said, yeah, sure. And I turned around and walked away. And he said,
Did you know what he was talking about?
No, I didn't, you know? And I was like, hooker, what? Get out of town. You know. And he says, no, I'm serious. And I said, what are you talking about? I'm not going to be a hooker. And so he started talking about some of the ideas that he had of other things that he wanted to do musically. And asked if I'd be interested. And I said, you know, I come as a package. You know, I am married and I'm happily married. And I have to talk to my husband because his opinion I have to take into consideration as well, out of respect. And so next thing I know, Roy comes popping into the dressing room for something. A chick had come in actually, and and Prince started getting all excited, and he's going, "What do you think? She'd be great. I'm thinking of having her do this or do that or whatever." And chick kind of looked at me, and he did one of these things. He says, "Well, she's awful. She's sure pretty enough." And I said, "Oh, thank you," but I'm still thinking like, what is he talking about? What am I going to get involved in here? And Roy comes in, and Prince looked at him almost accusingly to say, "I didn't know your wife sang. I didn't know she sang." And Roy just kind of smiled and says, "Yeah, she's really good." That's all he said, And he says, "Well," Prince says, "Well, I just talked to her about getting involved with something," and Roy looked at me, and I mentioned kind of mentioned a little bit what we had talked about, and I said, "What do you think?" And Roy just looked at me. He said, "You'd be a fool if you don't do it." And I looked at Prince and I said, "I'll take that as a yes." "Okay, let's do it. When does this start to happen?" And he said, "Just be on call." And the tour ended. 2 weeks after the tour ended, Brenda was out in Minnesota working with Vanity 6.
So Vanity was already there.
Vanity was there.
So,
Susan was,
so they were both there. So you were the final piece.
I guess so.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. What were some of your like initial impressions of Prince? I mean, obviously you recognize he was this impressive talent, but what other kind of thoughts were you having about him and the situation?
Um, as I began to work with him in a musical capacity, we were sort of discovering things about each other in that way. Um, he was discovering that I can write. When the first time he actually really heard my voice, not just sort of la 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 quietly with a tape, he just was pretty. I have to say, he was amazed, and I thank God for that. Um, and with about well, I the immense talent that he had was what was screaming at me so much, and the drive, not so much as ambition to be the biggest, the best, the most popular, most famous, whatever. It was his music. He had just so much inside of him that he wanted to get out, that he wanted, to share. Um, and he was a little guy, he was shorter than me, and I'm 5'2". Actually, I was 5'4" at the time, but as time has gone on, I've shrunk. And he was clearing 5 foot, maybe 5'1", something like that. And I used to think that was my very first impression of him when I met him in New York at the Ritz was we were like this to each other. His face was right here, and my face was right here. And we kind of giggled a little bit. And I don't know if he was giggling for the same reason I was, and that reason was because I wasn't having to look up. You know, he was right directly even with me. So he was a short guy, and that his eyes were absolutely gorgeous. I was lost just looking into his eyes, the color, the expression. Um, I was very not smitten, but I was just taken aback. And but then after the tour, on the Controversy tour, I liked working with him because I liked um, with the video stuff. He would talk about, he would ask, we would discuss certain things, and he would talk to me about trying to film certain things in a certain way so that he could see them in a different way, different moves that he was doing on stage with his choreography and stuff like that. And there was that part of him that, some people would be apt to say, oh, he's a little dictator. Oh, he's just like, he's so bossy and he's so this and he's so that, but he had a lot going on. And to stay on top of it all, I was amazed that I couldn't believe how he could stay on top of it all and do the writing that he was doing and always recording. I mean, you may have heard in other things that interviews and things that I've done where, you'd get the phone call from him at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, wanting you to come over and either listen to something or work in the studio or just watch a movie. And I used to think, does he ever sleep? Does he ever rest? Does he ever just chill out? And it's not a matter of I don't have time for that. It was just that he didn't really have time for it. And he was about as big as he got and as much money as he made. Well, how wealthy he became, it was never about the money with him. He was blessed, and he knew he was blessed that he had the talent that he had been given as a gift from God. And with the money that he was able to make, it helped to afford him to help people later on, different organizations that he contributed to and things like that. So, but I mean, if you were to talk to him, if you were to say, hey, you got $5, if he reached into his pocket, if he had any money on him, it would be one of those things where he'd reach into his pocket and he might pull out a bunch of crumbled bills in his hand and say, well, yeah, here, take a look and see if there might be a 5 in there somewhere. It's like, oh, what? You don't have a wallet? What? You what? But that's, it was, oh yeah, here, I guess here's some money.
If he even had pockets at that point. A lot of his clothes didn't
Well,
have
the trench
pockets,
coat
probably.
had pockets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your how did you initially get along with Susan and Vanity, and were you guys competitive or supportive, or what was the vibe like?
We were supported because we were all in it together and it was sink or swim. And I because of the musical background that I'd already had in terms of the professional, being on stage, big stages, different stages, recording studios, I mean, because had already been doing stuff at that level. Prince said, okay, well, you're going to be the boss. I'm going to leave this up to you to make sure that things get done the way I expect them to be done. And a lot of times he didn't tell me what he expected. We just had to, it was a trial by error sometimes. But Susan was great because she was very open. She was like a sponge. She was very open to suggestion, to learning, to doing things, because it wasn't a career for her. It was a learning experience, make some money, have some fun. With Vanity, it was another color to her palette of a career possibility. She had been a model. She had been an actress. She had done 2 or 3 B movies. There wasn't anything there wasn't any big, huge movies that she had been a part of yet. And but she'd had a modeling career that was pretty lucrative for her. And so she was so amazing. There was a lot of, like, when you try to put 2 magnets together and the opposite, and you can't, they're always kind of like that, There were times that they went like this between her and I, and then there was the times that it was like this. Um, because she was dating Prince, she felt that she could do whatever she wanted to, whenever she wanted to, and didn't have to listen to anybody. So timeline things, rehearsals, be in certain places to do certain things. Um, it was hard to lasso her in and get her to just get these things done. As far as like her stuff on stage, she really, that was her. Whatever performance she did, that was her. And that was her own thing. And she had this knack and ability to just get into it. And it was not anything that was what's the word? It was natural. She was a natural at it. Her performance, what she put into it.
Well, this was, very different seemingly from the prior types of, musical acts you had done.
Mm.
So when Prince explained his vision for what Vanity Six would be, uh, formerly the Hookers and then Vanity Six, and did he sort of tell you what basically character you would be, and how did that get fleshed out, and how did you feel about that?
Um, my character, the punk, came out because of the fights that we would have from time to time. He wanted me to dress a lot trashier than I was willing to be dressing. And so that was a bone of contention between the two of us. And I stood my ground. I said, I will only go so far with this. I'm not a prude by any sense of the word, but I am not going to take this as far as you want me to do. And so he said, okay, that's it right there. You're the punk. She's the sex siren, and she's the little girl. Aren't I cute? Kind of that pointing to Susan kind of thing. And that's kind of how that came about. I mean, I grew up. Um, I had two brothers, an older one and a younger one. So I grew up between two boys, and I was a tomboy growing up because I didn't have much choice. I had to fight and fend for myself a lot of times. So I knew how to tap into that sort of attitude. Um, and but I mean, I think some people in the fan world take it to the extreme, um, which happens. But am I a punk?
That Rhode Island attitude.
Rhode Island people, they don't take nonsense, and well, whatever.
What was the state of the tracks for that Vanity Six album when you first got exposed to them? I mean, were they demos Prince worked out? I know like Jesse Johnson was involved too, and um, you know, what was your studio time like? Related to those tracks.
Well, it was kind of Prince had pretty much the basic idea of what it was going to be like musically, those songs, and we worked with him. There was a lot of hanging out together at his house, working over. We'd get into conversations about different subjects of things, and from those conversations, sometimes some of the lyrics that were in the songs were things that like somebody may have made a remark about something in a conversation. So some of that came out. I mean, but with the first Vanity album, it was primarily mostly him that did most of it. I messed around with some of the lyrics with him, and he had Jesse come in and was doing some stuff. And then there was Des Dickerson's song, "He's So Dull," that was on the album that we did. And it was kind of that whole thing was like a test. We didn't not as far as I know, nothing was left over per se from that first incarnation of a girls group that the actual hookers that I had mentioned earlier. Um, he had wrote some tracks for that group, but none of that, anything that was on that first Vanity Sex album, that was all new stuff from that period, from us being together. So and like I said, because it was kind of like a test. Let's see how this is going to work out. Let's see how it's go where it's going to go. You know, Nasty Girl was that was purely Prince. That song was purely him. Um, so it was a combination. It was mostly him because he was trying to work out exactly what direction this was going to go. But there was little pieces of the puzzle that we added into it.
How did you feel when Nasty Girl became a hit like it did?
Um, when I first heard that song, I got scared that it was even going to be able to be played on the radio because I knew it was important that it was going to have to be on the radio. And what are we going to do with this? Is he going to do another version where certain words we're not going to be on? Is it the radio version? How what are we doing? You know, and I remember going, what have I got myself into? You know, and it was a challenge, like getting my mind wrapped around that whole thing, the sexuality and the sexual connotations in the lyrics, and just the blatantness of all of this, you know, and knowing that there were barriers, knowing that we were going to be thrown up against these barriers, and what was going to happen. Are we going to be able to break through barriers? Are we going to be, is this going to get squashed before it even has a chance to get off the ground any further? There was a lot going on in my head, wondering what was going to happen in that respect, because that was very obvious. Nobody releases stuff that way like that. And with his stuff, with the wearing the Speedo and the leggings, and he already kind of had that, starting to get more and more into that reputation with more sexual connotations in his stuff. I just I felt that it was, geez, there was a big change coming. It's pretty much what was going to happen. It was going to be a very big change, and we were going to be a part of it, and we were going to be a part of helping to make that change happen.
And a big part of that, I think, was that tour too that had you, Vanity Six, Time, and Prince, that 1999 tour.
The triple,
Um,
the triple threat tour.
yeah, I saw the one at Long Beach Arena in California. Phenomenal show.
Mm.
And what was it like for you being out on a tour like that?
It was great because I got to be with Roy, and I got to be a part of something that was making history. I knew it was going to make history. When things got to the point where the song was playing on the radio, it was doing really well, that we were, um, creating this fan base was happening. The popularity and all that, it was like, holy shit, mom, like, and I remember talking to her on the phone and saying stuff like that, and she was going, "Yep, you're doing it now, aren't you?" And it was exciting. It was very exciting. You know, I was happy and felt very blessed to be a part of it all.
What was it like the show where Jimmy and Terry got snowed in and they didn't make it?
It was a
An-
big,
Anxiety, a lot of anxiety.
it was a real big uh-oh, that I knew the shit was going to hit the fan, and it did. And but I just, I had so much faith in Prince in terms of the show, you know, immediate, solution. What are we going to do? The show must go on. We have to do the show. What are we going to do? And it happened. I mean, he made it happen, and it still went over. Unfortunately, with the two dudes that weren't there that should have been there. I felt really bad. Like, well, that it was kind of a burst in the bubble. Yeah.
And then, so it was right around that time when the first, concepts of Purple Rain were being formulated. And as far as timeline, did you first learn about the ambitions of doing that movie, or did Vanity split? Which came first?
Oh, the movie.
So you knew the movie was happening. Did you have any um, skepticism about the movie?
No, not at all. I thought it was my first thought was, um, you know, for Prince's timeline of things, of how what he could be doing or should be doing, or that for a few minutes that came into my mind when I first heard was, is this too soon for him to be doing something like this? In his career, should he wait a little bit longer? For to solidify things even more, or what? And then I went, no, 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 let's do it now. And I thought it was great. And I was excited because, especially when I found out that we were all going to be a part of it, because I love movies. I have 3 scripts that I want to finish up for movie ideas. And to be able to be a part of that and be on sets and see how it's done and be, creating this musical movie, this story. And I was very excited. I was happy about that. Yeah.
And were you already working on tracks for the second album when Vanity left?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had already been working on a bunch of stuff, and it was really disappointing. It wasn't really that surprising. Um, it wasn't surprise when she had Susan and I come to her place, and she told us what she was doing, what she was going to do. I wasn't surprised that she was doing it. I was just surprised at her timing. And I was very upset and disappointed that she couldn't have done the movie. At least done the movie. We had already gone into a lot of prep work for the movie. The album was pretty much the second Vanity Six album was pretty much done. Um, there was a lot of talk of like the tour to promote the movie and the music and the this and that, and it was just like, oh, why now? Why can't you wait? You got to do the movie with us, And Susan and I both tried to get her to stay to do it, and once she got it in her head that she was going to do, make a move doing something, there was no talk to bringing her back. There was no talk or talking her out of it. So, yeah.
Was her motivation purely, relationship related, or was it more monetary, or both? Or
I think it was a combination of a bunch of things. Yeah.
in your entire experience with in the Prince camp, what are one or two of your most unforgettable memories?
The movie, doing the whole movie. Um, the start of everything and watching and being a part of um the acceleration, the climb. that's one of them, you know, being a part of that and helping that. You know, I always liken it to a you know, Prince had a blueprint, and we were very instrumental in helping Tim to realize that blueprint, to help make that blueprint become a reality. And so I was very proud of having been a part of it, and I was very honored to have been working with him, and that that he chose me, even though it was a very unusual way of auditioning, which you know, it wasn't planned, that's for sure, as an audition, but that and the movie experience and just being able to have the relationship that I had with him, you know, it was pretty amazing. He's a pretty amazing guy, and I've never met anybody like him since, and I don't think I will.
How was the relationship subsequently after you were out of the camp? Was it still cordial?
It was very quiet, and it was just sort of like letting the dust settle, because Roy and I had gone through our problems, and he was still part of Prince's organization, and Prince had talked to me about doing a solo project with me. He talked to me numerous times about doing a solo project with me, and but you know, with the success of Purple Rain, he got very much into the movie thing, did Under the Cherry Moon, and then there was Graffiti Bridge, and there was The Family, there was, you know, all these other things that kept coming up, and Roy and I fell into a dark space, and we wound up becoming divorced, and that marriage broke up. And I moved to we were working with Dee Harris from a group called Fashion in London, and we were writing and recording together, and it was a tough period of time. It was exciting for me to be working and living in London. Um, I missed my family, and I went through my divorce with Roy when I was there, so it was a very big change in my life. Prince and I weren't speaking at the time because I didn't know where I stood. He didn't know where I stood, you know, so I did see him when he played in England. I went to the show, he had me come to the show, and I got up on stage with him at the after show party, after gig party that night, and did 17 days with him. And it was good to see him, and I felt a good connection. The the part of us that was us, our personal relationship, um, was still there, and I felt very blessed for that, because we had a closeness. Um, we were never involved romantically in any sense of the word, but we had a very close relationship, very, very good friendship there. So when I came back to the United States, I had some unfinished business that had to be cleared up um, in Minnesota, and I wanted to see Susan, and I wanted to see Prince, and so the three of us got together, and Paisley Park was being constructed at the time, and everything, his living quarters weren't done yet, but his recording studio was done enough for him to be able to go in and work, and he had us come in, and we hung out with him in the studio, and so that was good. And then it was after that point, after moving back to the States, that we would talk from time to time on the phone. But I became a mom in 1991, and I put everything aside
Mm.
to raise my son.
Which track that you worked on are you most proud of?
With Prince?
Yeah.
Oh, geez. I have to pick one.
Well, two albums, some other tracks, probably some that aren't even released yet, but uh is there one or two that just are near and dear to your heart?
17 Days is. I recorded that. He and I recorded that for the second Vanity Six album, and then he pulled it and said, "No, this is going to be on your solo album." And that's kind of how he introduced me the very first time about doing a solo project. And then he wound up releasing it on the B side of the EP of When Doves Cry. Left my vocal on there, but he released it. But then, as far as he was concerned, whenever we would talk, he would say, that song is your song. I don't own it. He wasn't going to give up ownership of it for sure. But as far as he was concerned, that's your song. You're welcome. And I give you permission to do whatever you want with that. If you want to record it and if you want to perform it, you've got my permission to do it anytime. And I said, great, thank you. So my second solo effort, my second solo album that I did, I did that. I did it. In fact, my son is singing with me on that song.
Your voice is also on the Bangles recording, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And Brenda, what are you up to right now that people should be aware of?
Musically,
Yeah. Or artistically or whatever.
I'm painting.
Uh-huh.
I'm painting. Musically, been kind of quiet. It seemed when the pandemic hit, you know, it created such a worldwide put a stop, and it was like the world just stopped all of a sudden. And also in 2020, the beginning of the pandemic here in the United States, I lost my brother, my older brother Bruce, that I worked with a number of times um, musically, and that really threw me for a loop. I was He had been sick for quite a long time, and I helped to look after him for a long time. We worked together for a long time, on and off, and musically, and he was an incredible photographer as well. In fact, one of Prince's tour things, I forgot which tour it is. Um, there's about 4 or 5 of my brother's photographs in it that he didn't take in a Prince, but didn't do anything musically. I kind of, because of everything being on hold, um, and having lost Bruce, the guitar went back under the bed. And I just said, that's it. I can't do this. I lost my music, to be honest with you. Um, I couldn't listen to much music. I couldn't I couldn't play. I couldn't do anything. And grief has a way of doing all kinds of funny things. There's no rules and regulations of how you're supposed to go through a grief period. And I just had to go with the flow and just let things be. So I didn't do anything musically for quite some time. And I started getting back into a few little things. There was a few songs that had to be written. It had to be, they had to, I had to get them out. And so I've done a little bit of writing, and there's a guy, a young man from Canada, from British Columbia, that I've done a little bit of something with, and his name is Callum Graham. And he's phenomenal, phenomenal guitar player and composer, very acoustic style, and just very, very unique. And there's a lot of, I've heard a number of different guitar players that do some of the stuff that, like what he does, but he's kind of like Prince in the sense that there's a magic there with him. and he's on tour in Europe right now. But if you get a chance to hear, he's got a lot of stuff on YouTube, or you get a chance to hear him somewhere along the line. Callum Graham, he's phenomenal. And I'm going to, my brother and I talked about doing a blues album. About a year before he died, we started talking about it. And one of the things about Callum's music and his recordings, they're very healing. And listening to his music pulled me out. It pulled me back out again. And got the juices going. And I've been singing again. Nothing out doing any shows or anything. I've done a couple of surprise, get up and do some stuff with somebody on the stage, but not a show of my own. And now there's I'm starting to put some material together for a blues album.
Well, that's great to hear.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're on the rebound finally from that. I mean, yeah, I mean, grief is something else. It affects people differently, and you got to just allow it to run its course,
Well, I mean, it was hard enough and bad enough that I'd lost my brother the beginning of that year, and well, that whole year, that first year of COVID, I lost 11 people. And funny enough, not one of them died from COVID. But that was on top of Bruce passing in the beginning of the year, and then as these other things happened, it just exacerbated my grief that much more, and I'm not going to say I was a total mess, but I was a hurting puppy for a while. Yeah. So I started, in the last year, I started trying to make find my way back a little bit, and just by chance, I came across Callum, and between one thing and another, and listening to more of his stuff, and having some conversation with him, his music has really pulled me right back out, and has really helped me a lot. And music is like that. Music is a very healing thing. I just couldn't find the right thing that was doing anything, that was doing it for me until I came across Callum. So.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, Brenda. And when you say blues for yourself, covers or some of your own compositions, you think, or
both? It'll be both. Yeah.
Okay, we'll keep an ear and eye out for that. And thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for the music too.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Truth in Rhythm. A big thank you goes out to our guest as well as to you, the viewer and listener. Also, much gratitude to Pleasure for supplying the show's funky opening and closing music. As a reminder, you can always access the complete list of linked shows by episode at funknstuff.net. I urge you to support this program and receive the extra benefits along with that by subscribing to the Funk and Stuff channel on YouTube and sharing it with funk, R&B, and jazz lovers, joining Truth and Rhythm's membership program at Patreon, submitting a donation at funknstuff.net, buying Everything is on the One, the First Guide to Funk book at Amazon, shopping at the Funky Things store for cool merchandise at funknstuff.net, and linking through funknstuff.net for all of your Amazon purchases. In addition, if you're an artist or anyone seeking proven, results-oriented professional marketing, PR, writing, or editing consultation or production, check out the media services section at funknstuff.net. Also, I encourage you to drop me a line at scottg@funknstuff.net. I love the feedback, suggestions, guest requests, appearance and sponsorship inquiries, and just talking about my favorite subject, groove-based music. For now, and as always, this is Scott Dr. GX Goldfine saying, Keep on vibrating to the rhythm of the one.